Good evening, everyone, and welcome to lesson number 4 of My God Defining the Divine, His Expectations. So, the last 3 weeks, we've been focusing on the nature of God. We've been learning a lot of new things about God. We discussed God's feelings, how much God cares for us, how much God feels for us. Tonight, we're going to be going on a little bit of a different direction. We're focusing on not so much about God, but what God should mean to us and how we are meant to be in a relationship with Him. So we're going to ask 4 questions. Question number 1: do I have to believe in God to be Jewish? Question number 2: is it kosher to have doubts about God? Question number 3: why must I fear God? And question number 4: I'm okay with believing in God, but I'm not religious. Can we still have a relationship? So begin with question number 1: do I have to believe in God to be Jewish? Now, Judaism is a religion, right? By that definition, a religion has a set of beliefs. If you believe in that set of belief, then you're part of that religion. If you don't believe in that set of the beliefs, you're not part of that religion. Do we apply that same standard to Judaism? I'm sure we all know people who are very proudly Jewish, very publicly Jewish, yet they're also not shy about proclaiming that they don't really believe. Is it okay for people like that to publicly express their Jewishness and pride in it when they don't believe in any of the principles or ideas in Judaism? So to answer that question, we need to figure out what exactly is Jewishness. So we have a chart on page 112 in the book, which asks the question, what is a Jew? And it says, look at the terms below, along with their definitions. There's different ways you can categorize groups of people: race, culture, nation, religion. Could you describe the Jewish people as either a race, a culture, a nation, or a religion? Let's go to the video.
What makes a Jewish person Jewish? Do you need a kippah, a necklace, synagogue membership? Do you have to do anything at all? Here's a mythbuster. Plenty of Jewish people have never seen a synagogue and have no clue about Jewish symbols, beliefs, traditions, or cuisine. But they are as Jewish as Moses. So, what's it all about? You see, we love to sort things into categories, create neat labels, and use those labels to help us understand our world a little better. Here are 4 popular ways of classifying people. Does being Jewish have to do with any of these? Are you Jewish because you belong to the Jewish race? Hold on, is there even such a thing as a Jewish race? Look at these images. These folks are all equally Jewish. Race doesn't appear to be a factor. Actually, non-Jewish people from the most diverse places and races can become fully Jewish. So we clearly can't define Jewishness as belonging to a specific race. Why don't we try culture? Are you Jewish because you follow the Jewish culture? Well, you might be, if there was a Jewish culture to follow. But there is no single culture common to all Jews. Here's why. The ancient Jews lived in the land of Israel for over a millennia, but they were forced into exile by the ancient Romans. That happened almost 2 millennia ago. Since then, Jews settled all over the globe. The result of Jews spending centuries in very different kinds of places was that they developed many very distinct cultures, including unique ways of dressing, unique foods, styles of music, prayers, practices, dialect, and celebrations. The result? There is no single uniform Jewish culture. So Jewishness is not based on culture. But don't worry, we've got 2 labels left. What about nationality? That's a legal term. It means that you belong to a certain country or state. If Jewish is a description of your nationality, it would mean that you are a citizen of a Jewish state. But that's not the case. We've got British, French, Alaskan, Turkish, Thai, Irish, Spanish, Argentinian, and Indian Jews. You'll find Jews in every country, and almost all of them are citizens only of the state within which they reside. Even the state of Israel includes millions of non-Jewish Israeli citizens. That pops the nationality argument, doesn't it? And here's a bigger buster. Historically, the Jews did not have an independent state for most of their existence as a people. Strike 3. Religion. That sounds good. Are you Jewish because you follow the Jewish religion? Well, no, because many Jews do not associate themselves with any religion. In fact, there are many Jews who do not even know they are Jewish. And there are also Jews who practice a religion other than Judaism. But according to Judaism, they are all equally Jewish. Phew, this is really tough. I guess it's time for the one and only Jewish answer. Being Jewish means that you have a Jewish soul. How do you get a Jewish soul? The most common way is through a Jewish mother. You see, according to Judaism, every child to a Jewish mother is naturally born with a Jewish soul. Your mother's race and nationality make no difference. She might follow the Jewish religion or culture, or she might not. But if she's Jewish, you're Jewish. And there's no opting out. If you're born a Jew, it means that God decided that you're meant to be Jewish for life. So if you're Jewish, thank your mom. Then there's conversion. If you were not born to a Jewish mother, but you complete the authentic and challenging Jewish process of becoming Jewish, God will give you a Jewish soul at the moment of conversion. So what can we take away from all this? It is the privilege and responsibility of each Jew to lead a Jewish life, but those who do not are authentically Jewish. Living the Jewish way allows your soul to shine, but it does not create your soul. That's already alive and kicking inside you, waiting for you to connect. So what is a Jew? It's a spiritual force within you.
So what is a Jew? So in that video, we explored the option of race does not work because there are all races of Jews, or Jews of all races. Is it a culture? While there are individual Jewish cultures, Jews from around the world have all kinds of different Jewish cultures. So there's no singular culture for all Jews. One nation, there are Jews living as loyal citizens of every nation. Is it a religion? There are millions of Jews who identify as Jews, yet are not religious. So what is a Jew? One who has a Jewish soul. A Jewish soul is attained by birth or through conversion. Practice or belief does not impact one's Jewish status. Let's go to text number 2 to learn a little bit more about the Jewish soul. Jim, would you like to begin? Text number 2, please.
Jewishness is not a casual feature of a Jew's identity. Rather, his or her very essence. The status of a human, animal, or vegetable is immutable. Declaring that one is no longer a human, that animal really isn't an animal, or that vegetable is no longer a vegetable, is ineffective. Even if a person will go as far as to deny their own existence or the existence of a human species, it still won't help. It is not a question of free will. We possess free will over our behavior, action, speech, and thought, but not over our essence and identity.
So a Jew is absolutely supposed to believe, and a Jew is supposed to express that belief in concrete actions, right? The ideal scenario is a synchronized Jew who expresses his or her Jewishness through behavior and belief. But failure to do so doesn't undo one's Jewish status. Go to any shul on Yom Kippur, packed, overflowing with Jews. But ask the question, right? How many of you are believers, right? Surprisingly, you'll find that a bunch of them say, no, I don't really believe. And you ask them, so why are you here? Why are you in shul? And they say, because it's Yom Kippur, right? And I'm Jewish. Because that's just what Jews do. It has nothing to do with practice, it has nothing to do with observance. It has ultimately to do with your essence. A person could surrender the citizenship of the country that they grew up in. A person can renounce any religious belief that they want. You can change your culture, adopt a new culture, but you cannot change your essence. Your essence is ultimately not changeable. There's a great story, I may have told this before, that Groucho Marx used to tell. Groucho Marx said that he had a friend who was a classic self-hating Jew. And this friend had a friend who had a massive hunchback, really stooped over, big hunchback. And they're walking down the street together and they pass by a shul. And the self-hating Jew turns to the hunchback and says to him, you know, I used to be Jewish. And the hunchback looks at him and says, oh, and I used to be a hunchback. Your Jewish identity has nothing to do with your belief, and it has nothing to do with your behavior. A Jew is connected to your core, to your essence, to your soul identity, and it cannot be changed or affected by actions. Now, if this is the case, right, that our real core identity is our soul, how is it possible that there could be a Jew that does not believe? How is it possible that a Jew can profess and proclaim they don't believe when your core identity, the very essence of who you are, is that Jewish identity? Well, interestingly, throughout history, the majority of Jews who proclaimed to be non-believers would died rather than give up their Jewish identity. Let's go to text number 4. Brad, would you like to read text number 4?
Even the most irreverent and sinful Jews typically surrender their life to sanctify God's name. They are prepared to suffer harsh torture rather than denounce the one God, even if they are morally uncultivated, uneducated, and ignorant of God's greatness. Even concerning the little they do know, they give it little serious thought. So they aren't giving up their lives as a result of intellectual appreciation or deep thinking about God. Instead, without any intellectual appreciation or careful thinking, they give up their lives, for they consider it impossible to betray the one God despite lack of any reasoning.
So throughout Jewish history, when the Crusades came to town, when the pogroms came to town, when the Inquisition came to town, there were Jews who publicly lived their life in a way contrary and antithetical to everything and anything Jewish. But when their life was on the line, when their soul was on the line, when push came to shove, they immediately and almost automatically, right, gave their life better than separating themselves from their Jewish identity. And there's something that's very fascinating about it. There is an expression, there are no atheists in the foxhole, right? It's an expression that makes a lot of sense. When in danger, you turn to God. It's an action of despair. That even a person who would proclaim their entire life atheistic belief, when there is a threat, right, when there is danger, that is when they're going to turn to God because of that despair. Yet, Jews behaved in a completely opposite way. Jews who lived their whole life in an atheist fashion, they invited danger even when they can easily escape it by denouncing God. Right? The atheist in the foxhole turns to God, right, when their life is on the line. Right? The Jew could reject God and save their life, yet they don't. The Jew turns to God, putting their own life in peril, putting their own life in danger. A modern example, though not as dramatic in terms of sacrificing your life, there's a pretty well-known Jewish writer named A.J. Jacobs. Right? He writes in magazines, publishes books. One of the books that he wrote is called A Year Living Biblically. He was going to follow the literal interpretation of biblical verses for the point of making fun of it, right? To make a joke of people who believe in religion. The cover of the book, he's walking through Times Square dressed like a shepherd from 3,000 years ago with a sheep. So you read the book, and He's again making fun of all kinds of biblical Jewish practices. And then all of a sudden, something that I was not expecting. What was I not expecting? He's now continuing to the second half of the Bible, right? The New Testament. And he's going to observe the various religious practices of the New Testament. And all of a sudden, he says something very powerful. That he did not go to Hebrew school. He did not have a bar mitzvah. Right? He had a Christmas tree in his house growing up. No Jewish affiliation, education on any level. And now he's being paid all this money to do this book. And he is doing all these things, making fun of Judaism left, right, and center. And now it's his turn to do the Christian stuff. And he's going to do it, but there's one thing he cannot do. He cannot pray to Jesus. He cannot pray to Jesus. Because he felt that somehow praying to Jesus, I am separating myself from my people. I cannot do it. The whole book is making fun of his people. That's the whole book. He's paying tons of money to do it. And he's still willing to do a lot of this New Testament stuff. But that far, he simply could not do it. Because in your core, in your essence, he just sensed that this is ultimately a violation. On a conscious level, doesn't believe. But on that soul level, that core level identity, there's nothing that he can do about it. So do I have to believe in God to be Jewish? Jewish identity is dependent on the soul, not one's belief. If a person was born Jewish or converted, they are Jewish, period. Beyond the conscious, all Jews have complete faith. That means there is that neshama, there's that powerful soul that is the core identity. And when we know this, hopefully that will help us tap into it and to explore it and bring it out into our actions as well. All right, so that's principle number 14, right, that we've been learning so far in the course. Any thoughts before we go to question number 2? All right, question number 2. Is it kosher to have doubts about God? So imagine there's a person who is a believer, right? Observant, religious, all this type of terminology that we like to throw around. But from time to time, doubts creep in their mind. Did God really create the world? Does God really care what I do? And it bothers the person, right? It bothers the person because they believe that their faith should be stronger. And they were like, am I a good Jew? Am I a Jew the way I'm supposed to? If I'm letting these thoughts creep into my mind, how can a faithful believer harbor doubts? It seems to be a complete and total contradiction. Now, the answer, of course, is that this is perfectly normal. This is absolutely normal. God created the world in this way on purpose. Why? To make our choices meaningful. God wishes that a Jew be tempted with alternatives, right? In order for our choices to mean something, free choice has to be a possibility. Therefore, what did God do? He created the Yetzer Hara, he created the evil inclination. That what's its job? Full time? Try to get in your mind, tries to get in your heart, tries to distract you. That's what a normal person is. A normal person has a Yetzer Hara, and the Yetzer Hara tries to distract you. It's not a sign of weakness at all. And despite the allurement, he or she chooses to remain steadfast in their faith. Despite the fact that doubts come into your mind, despite the fact that you may have these questions, you choose to remain a committed Jew. That's what makes the choice so much more special and so much more beautiful. There's a story told of a chassid of the Tzemach Tzedek, right, the third Rebbe of Chabad. He came to the Rebbe brokenhearted, and he said, recently, I've been having these doubts. They're creeping into my mind. I can't get them out of my head. Am I normal? I'm freaking out. And the Tzemach said, it's not a problem. You're good. It's okay. He's like, what do you mean it's good? It's okay. I'm supposed to be this observant Hasidic person, and these doubts are popping into my head. So again, the Tzemach Tzedek said to him, what's the problem? Right? What's the issue? And he said, because I'm Jewish, right? That's a problem. And the Rebbe said, if that's the case, you have nothing to worry about at all, right? You're Jewish. You know what that means? You have a neshama, right? That is your core identity. That is your essence. That is absolutely who you are. The fact that you have doubts that creep into your head, That's because you're a human being. You're a normal person. You have a Yetzer Hara. You have an evil inclination. Not a problem. Don't worry about it. You're a Jew. You're good to go. I'm a Jew with a soul who believes in the Creator. But I have doubts. The Tzemach Tzedek says, so what? God rigged this game. Outside voices will come along and try to test our resolve. Go to text number 5. Mitchell, you like to read text number 5?
God gave the people of power, permission and power to hold to him for his violence to overcome.
So that's a pretty powerful statement over there, because it completely changes how we reflect upon what it means that we have doubts pop up in our head, right? Yeah, people have doubts, but you know what? God's confidence in your ability to overcome them. God doesn't give a person any challenge that is too difficult for them to be able to handle. And that applies to all things. We have a Yetzer Hara, and the Yetzer Hara tries to get us in all kinds of trouble. It has attractions, lust, desires, laziness, jealousy, anger, to a million things. One of the things that the Yetzer Hara also tries to do is it tries to cast doubts into our head too. Having those doubts, what does that mean? What does it confirm? You have the strength to overcome that challenge. They are, in fact, a testament to your superior power. So counter them from a place of empowerment. But how do you overcome them? If you have a doubt in your mind, should you debate it? Should you research it? Should you spend all night on YouTube and Google and Wikipedia trying to get answers? Do you think that is going to be helpful and productive? In general, no. While yes, it is valuable to learn, and a person should always learn and know answers to questions, at the end of the day, when you recognize there's just a Yetzer Hara, you know what the Yetzer Hara does? It keeps coming back for you, right? Unless you're a tzaddik, right? Unless you're a completely righteous individual that are few and far between, your Yetzer Hara is going to be a part of your life and forever. You're never going to be able to resolve every issue. So if you stay up awake at night and can't go to sleep until you figure out every answer, ultimately, you're not going to be successful at all. So what should your attitude be? It should be like scammers calling you from India, right? They're driving you crazy. They're distracting you. Should you argue with them? Should you talk to them? Are you going to accomplish anything? You're not going to accomplish anything. Ignore it. Push it away. Go to text number 7. A way to deal with your scamming Yetzer Hara. Eileen, would you like to read text number 7?
With your animal soul, with evil inclination, and thunder against it indignantly in the night. How long will you hide God's infinite light from you, denying the self-evident? This will help your godly soul see the truth of God's endless unity with the clarity of sensory vision, and not just by the power of deduction and logic. For the Jewish people are believers, children of believers.
So the Alter Rebbe has this great strategy on dealing with your Yetzer Hara. Your Yetzer Hara throws up these challenges in front of you, but the reality is they're not real, they're not strong, they're not solid. They're just stupid things from the Yetzer Hara trying to drive you crazy. And sometimes you have to just say to your Yetzer Hara, mind your own business, right? Stop it, right? You may have these, like, you want to go to shul, but you get lazy and tired and you end up not going to shul. Sometimes you got to say to yourself, I got to get over this business, right? I got to go, you guys got to go to shul, right? The person has to go to shul. I can't deal with it. The same thing when it comes to these doubts that come into your head. Sometimes you got to just tell your Yetzer Hara, enough, right? Enough. I am a Jew, a believer, the children of believers, and my children are also going to be children of believers as well. So is it kosher to have doubts about God? Yes, it's part of God's plan to test us. The same way that our Yetzer Hara, right, causes thoughts and attractions and desires about a million different things in our life, things about belief are going to come up as well. That's called being a normal, healthy person. Swat them away and carry on. That is the approach. All right, any questions before the next one? All right. Question number 3. Why must I fear God? So for almost 9 years, right? My wife and I, we were shluchim in Olympia, Washington. And a big part of what we did was work with college students at Evergreen State College. Every Wednesday, good 3-4 hours, I would sit in the middle of the college square with a big sign, ask the rabbi, and have incredible conversations with people. One of the most common questions that came up is, what is this business with fearing God? Religions are into this whole fear thing. Is fear a healthy thing in a relationship? If a person says, I fear my spouse, you want to call some protective services or something like that. You want to call somebody. This is not a positive thing. Fear in a relationship does not seem healthy. Yet there is a serious mitzvah in the Torah. Fear your God, right? Biblical command. It's actually one of the 6 mitzvahs that a person is supposed to be doing 24/7. Not every mitzvah could you do 24/7. Blowing the shofar, that's really only Rosh Hashanah. However, there is a command, an obligation to fear God. Anytime you're awake, you have to fear God. Fear destroys relationships. Why does God command us to fear him? Right? Did we just jump ahead? Hold on a second, right? Why does God command us to fear him? God loves us. He wants to be in a relationship with us. That's why he created the world. Why introduce something so toxic, something so dangerous, something so unhealthy like fear into the relationship? The answer has to be that when we're talking about fear, we're talking about a very different type of fear. We know that in Hebrew, when we want to compliment a person who is committed, dedicated, devoted, we say they are a yiras shemayim. That means they have a fear of heaven. But when we say it, it's not negative, it's not derogatory, it's very positive and it's uplifting. It's a beautiful compliment to say that a person fears heaven. So what do we mean? So first of all, we do not mean this. Right? The American Psychological Association, they define fear as a basic and intense emotion aroused by the detection of an imminent threat. When we talk about the mitzvah to fear God, we are not talking about imminent threat. That's not what we mean. Let's go to text number 8b, where the Rambam describes what imminent threats, where the Rambam describes the Jewish approach to fear of heaven. Mitchell and Ali, did you read yet?
Infinite wisdom that defies all comparison. They will immediately love, praise, and glorify God, yearning with tremendous desire to know God's great name. When they reflect on these matters, they will immediately tremble in awe and fear, aware that they are but tiny, humble, and dull creatures of slight, petty wisdom before his perfect knowledge.
So here the Rambam describes what it means to fear God, and he uses the word fear, but the context here has nothing to do with the detection of an imminent threat. It actually writes that it's an emotion that stems from an appreciation of how great God is and how small we are in comparison. It's an expression of awe. It's an expression of respect. It's an expression of humility. That's what we're talking about when we talk about fear of God. Fear is such an incorrect translation. I hate when people use that word because that's not what it means, right? Based on what the Rambam describes over here, humility, awe, appreciation. And the Rambam writes that it flows and follows after love of God. It's an extension of love in God. It's not like the first stage, oh, I'm afraid, and then eventually you grow to have love. That's not what the Rambam says. Look at the paragraph, right? He talks about what is the way to love and fear. A person contemplates God, right? And what's the result? You immediate love, praise, glorifying God's name, right? You're reflecting on this. All of a sudden, you're going to have such awe, absolute awe from the greatness of Hashem. So it's a totally different concept. Now, whenever we talk about emotions, it's difficult to maintain emotions over a long period of time, right? You go through an experience, that experience is emotional, your emotions are surging, but then the experience is over and they die down. When I was at the Kinnis HaShluchim Sunday night in New York, there were very powerful stories told about the self-sacrifice of Shluchim and their communities in Ukraine, and tears were flowing, like absolutely tears were flowing. But an hour later, 2 hours later, you left, you're on the way back, I got back to Crown Heights, it dissipated. Why? That's the nature of emotions. So how do we maintain it, right? How do we maintain a consistent emotional experience? So the Alter Rebbe suggests a beautiful meditation in text number 9. Jim, would you like to read text number 9?
Contemplate God's greatness and dominion that envelops all worlds, both higher and lower, and how he is invested in all the worlds, while simultaneously transcending all of them. And God is standing above you, his glory fills the entire world, and yet he observes you and searches your heart to see if you are serving him appropriately. Accordingly, you should serve him with awe, reverence, and standing before a king. Contemplate this at length to the extent of your intellectual capacity and available time.
So I think the Alter Rebbe really expresses this idea in a very beautiful way. In religion, when you think about fear of God, right? God is the big policeman in the sky. There's a security camera posted on you at all times. And that can be frightening and that can be uncomfortable. But that's not the way that the Alter Rebbe explains it, right? In my own words, the Alter Rebbe is essentially saying, picture in your mind the person that you most respect in the world, right? The greatest celebrity, whether it's a result of a Hollywood, sports, science, philosophy, politics, religion, whoever the person is that you admire and respect the most. And that person shows up at your house and wants to be your best friend and wants to hang out with you all the time. You would be in awe that this person wants to be part of my life. It would have a huge impact and effect on you. The Alter Rebbe said that's exactly how our relationship is with God. God, who is greater than great, who created time and space, who's transcendent beyond anything you could imagine, who created the entirety of all existence with the planets, with the galaxies, with the fish, everything that's out there, right? It was nothing for God to be able to do it. He created all of that, something from nothing. Who does he care about? Who does he want to be involved with? You. When does he want to be involved? All the time. God can't get enough of you. He wants to be around you, wants to be connected to you. This, recognizing that you're always in the presence of Hashem could be inspiring. It's uplifting. Can make a person humble as well. So realizing that this awe-inspiring God is watching you at all times, not like a security camera, but because he wants to be with you, he wants to be around you. He created the world so he could have a relationship with you. This will lead you to a constant awareness and awe of his presence. When you practice this meditation, you can feel it and sense it. We all know that if you went to, a major waterfall, you saw a mountain, you saw a landscape, you would feel a sense of awe because you see the fingerprints of God on that. It's majestic. But the reality is, to create something from nothing is the exact same miracle for this fabulous shul chair that we have as it is for the Grand Canyon. When you recognize that there's the same presence of God in that chair as there is the Grand Canyon, you can perceive and recognize godliness around you 24/7. But we still could ask a question. We understand that fear of God really means awe, right? The translation is not always so good. It's not so much fear, it means awe. But can't we stick to love? Okay, we recognize that the fear that we're talking about is not the negative fear, it's a totally different thing. But what's wrong with loving Hashem? Why does there have to be a mitzvah? We should also have this awe, fear type element. What's wrong with love, right? Let's stick to love. That should work beautifully. Any thoughts? Anyone have any feelings why that might not be good? Or might not be enough? Tell you another story. So imagine there's a husband who's at work. His wife calls him up and says, what time are you planning on coming home tonight? Because it's really important to me. Mean a lot to me if you could be home by 5 o'clock tonight. Husband says, no problem, I'll be home by 5. He's on his way home and he thinks to himself, my wife is really a fabulous person. So special, just so loving, so caring. I want to do something for her. Her favorite flowers are these like special calla lily flowers. I'm going to bring her flowers tonight. So he stops off at the flower store. And they're out of calla lilies. Nothing. All right, so that's it. He wants to get these flowers for his wife. He's going to another store, right? Drives 20 minutes across town to another store. They do not have the calla lilies. He's getting frustrated. He knows how much his wife loves these calla lilies. So he drives even further. And finally, he finds the most beautiful bouquet of calla lily flowers you could imagine. Gets back in the car, comes home, and he's expecting his wife to be overjoyed, delighted, so happy to see him. And she looks at him with a very different expression on her face. And he doesn't understand. What's the problem? She says, it's 6 o'clock, right? I needed you to be home at 5 o'clock. What's the problem here? The man was doing it out of love, affection for his wife. But he did not take into effect what she wants, what she needs. Love can be selfish because love is about how I feel. I like you. You're so beautiful. You're so talented. You're so wonderful. You make me feel like $1 million. I want to spend time with you. Love can be selfish. I want to connect to him. I want to make him happy. It can be very self-focused. So when it comes to our relationship with God, if it's just based on love, it's how I feel, self-focused type of relationship. Awe is a more humbling type of emotion because it's an awareness of how great he, she, or it is, right? Your personal desires don't matter. That's not what's relevant. What's relevant is the other. So yes, love is fabulous, and we should feel that love. However, ultimately, that won't fuel the relationship because the moment it's not entertaining for you, you might move on to something else. However, awe, that really can keep a relationship afloat because what is your concern? What do you need? How can it help you? How can it make you happy? And that is why awe is critical in our relationship with God as well. We have love and we have awe. It's not just spiritual entertainment for ourselves, but it's also what it is that God wants from us. Yes, Mitchell. Yeah, a relationship that is based on something will not last, right? A relationship that is not based on something will endure forever. It's the same principle. So why must I fear God? Fear of God is a deep sense of awe. It's not about hiding in the corner because you're on camera. It takes us out of our naturally selfish ways, bringing us closer to God in a real, meaningful way. And finally, question number 4, the last question for tonight. I'm okay with believing in God, but I'm not religious. Can we still have a relationship? To answer this question, we have to think about what does it mean to be religious? How do you measure it? How do you define it? Am I religious? Are you religious? Look at the choices and the experiences, the education that people have had in their life. How could a person truly, accurately define and label a person as religious or not? Anyone who's been to Chabad before knows we do not like labels, right? Labels are for clothing, right? It's the classic line that the Rebbe used to say. Religion is commonly viewed as a status and an identity. He is religious, that person is not religious. People like to make these proclamations. At both ends, identifying religiously is dangerous. Whether you identify as not religious or as religious, they're unhelpful, unproductive, and sometimes can have negative consequences. What do I mean by that? If a person identifies as non-religious, What's the problem? The problem is they'll say, listen, if I'm not at all in, then what's the point of doing anything? I've heard many people say, oh, I'm not religious. I don't do that mitzvah. What's the connection? What does this mean? Religious. You labeled yourself as a not religious person, so that is somehow cutting you off from any Jewish practice or observance that is within your reach, that is at your fingertips, that doesn't require a major change. So it's not healthy to look at yourself, defining yourself as I'm not religious. It's just going to lead to further alienation and disconnection. What about identifying as religious? Why would that be a problem? Have you ever seen a person that from all external appearances looked very religious, but maybe not everything is so kosher in that person's life? If I look the part, there can't be much wrong with my little misdoings, right? I observe Shabbos and kosher, and so I do all these mitzvahs. But maybe you also talk a lot of lashon hara, right? Maybe you don't have very good character traits, and there are other transgressions that you do. By viewing yourself as I'm such a religious person will cause you to overlook and to ignore other shortcomings that a person has. So it's important that we recognize we're not getting into these type of labels. Let's go to text number 10. Fredlin, would you like to read text number 10?
The Jew is only capable of violating God's will because of a certain spirit of insanity that takes hold of them, convincing them that this infraction won't sever their connection with God. Why? Because I wear tzitzit and put on tefillin.
So they might have done 25 transgressions just this week alone. Oh, but because I wear tefillin and tzitzis, somehow I'm still a fabulous, wonderful Jew. So labeling yourself as religious or not religious ultimately is not productive. It's not healthy. And there's a much better way of looking at it. Judaism is not about attaining a religious state. Judaism is about serving and connecting with God, which is accomplished through mitzvah. However, what should your focus be? Right? I want to serve God. I want to connect to God. I may do it more often. I may do it less often. But it's not about defining yourself in a particular state or in a particular status. Judaism is not about wearing a uniform or about not wearing the uniform. And it's not about rules and regulations either. Even though there are rules and regulations, and they certainly are a part of it, that's not the bottom line. The bottom line is serving, connecting, developing that relationship with Hashem. Because if a person is a quote-unquote religious person, but then you sin and transgress, you're no holier than the atheist at that moment. And the same thing, a person who defines themselves as non-religious, when they do that mitzvah, that one mitzvah, they're as holy as Moshe at that time. So these other labels are ultimately irrelevant. Go to text number 12. Eileen, please.
Before every mitzvah, you recite a blessing. Who has sanctified him. This means that a mitzvah is akin to a man who marries and sanctifies a woman to live with him in perfect unity, as the verse states. He shall attach to his wife, and they shall be of one flesh. When you engage in Torah and mitzvot, your godly, animating soul unites with God in similar fashion, only infinitely more so. That's why King Solomon compared the soul's union with God to the marriage of bride and groom in Song of Songs, using terms of attachment, passion, yearning, hugging, and kissing.
The Alter Rebbe describes the value of doing a mitzvah is the most intimate connection that a person can have with God. That is something that has infinite value and something that has eternal value, right? And stands strong and clear before Hashem. Makes no difference, religious, not religious. These terms have nothing to do with anything. Regardless of your consistency of mitzvah behavior, it is always worthwhile to enhance our relationship with God. It is always valuable. It's always meaningful in the truest possible sense. Now, so to this question, I believe, right? I'm a proud Jew. I'm in, but I'm not so religious, right? Should a person do a mitzvah? Should a person be involved? Absolutely. Forget about being religious, right? Do a mitzvah, right? Do a mitzvah. That is what our attitude should be. How impactful could that mitzvah be, even if you're not the most consistent person? Text number 13. Mitchell, please.
Throughout the entire year, people ought to view themselves as half risen, half unrisen. They ought to see the whole world equally balanced between worthy and unworthy. If they perform one mitzvah, they tip their own balance. What of the entire world to the side of goodness and bring deliverance and salvation to themselves and others. This is implied by the first. The righteous person lives, i.e., one who acts righteously, tips the balance of the entire world to virtue and redemption.
So, what value is there for one mitzvah if a person is not a consistently mitzvah-observing person? One mitzvah may seem insignificant, yet if we evaluate the world as equally balanced, this one mitzvah has tremendous value and can bring the final redemption. Never underestimate the value of a mitzvah. It could be the mitzvah that a person does one time that they never did before, weren't planning on doing again. Oh, that person's not religious. That person literally could have just brought Mashiach at that moment and at that second. Don't worry about being religious, right? Do a mitzvah, right? There's nothing more valuable and precious than that. So I'm okay with believing in God, but I'm not religious. Can we still have a relationship? Forget about religion and start building your relationship with God. Do a mitzvah.
Lesson 4. His expectations. 1. Judaism is not only a culture, ethnicity, race, or religion. It is the essence of a Jew by dint of their having a Jewish soul. 2. Because of their Jewish soul, a Jew, A, is inherently Jewish, regardless of whether they believe in God, and B, really does believe in God. 3. Doubts about faith are normal and not indicative of a lack of faith. Rather, God sends feelings of doubt to test our resolve. 4. Inasmuch as doubts are just outside voices testing a Jew's resolve, they do not define his or her identity. The best way to deal with such challenges is not by engaging them, but by ignoring them. 5. Fear of God isn't feeling threatened by God. Rather, it is respecting and being in awe of Him. 6. Respect is a critical component in a Jew's relationship with God. It keeps one committed, even if love lapses. 7. Judaism isn't about the label religion. It is about connecting with God through Torah and mitzvot. 8. You don't have to be religious to have a relationship with God. Even if you are religious, you still need to maintain your relationship with God in actual practice.
Next week, Wednesday night, 7:30, we will continue with lesson number 5, his paradoxes. So some really fascinating stuff next week. And as always, please go myjli.com/mygod to continue learning on the topic of tonight's class. And at the end of the lesson in the textbook, there's a wealth of information. So again, please utilize the fabulous work that is in the textbook.